Namaste, Jordan. How are you? Which part of the world are you in?
I'm actually here in Stockholm, Sweden today.
What's special?
We're on tour actually with Dream Theater. We're moving all around Europe, and
Uh-huh.
today, nicely, I have a day off, so it's the perfect time to chat with you.
Marvelous, marvelous. I have a couple of very interesting questions coming your way as part of our agenda today.
Great, look forward to it.
You were considered a child prodigy since the age of 9. You joined the Juilliard School of Performing Arts, and you had several mentors that include the likes of teachers such as Magda, who was the Hungarian teacher. We had Adele Marcus, Katherine Parker, and many more. So I'm sure there must have been a lot of pressure in terms of living up to certain expectations. So how did you make sure that you stayed motivated and kept learning in spite of all these pressures of living up to certain expectations?
That's a good question. I mean, when I was a young person, my whole world was this kind of thing. I mean, I got into the kind of avenue, if you will, of classical education, and I didn't know anything else. When you're a kid, you're
Uh-huh.
kind of led in a particular direction, and in general, you go with it. So I just thought that that was the way life worked, and I was always so dedicated to my music, and I loved my teachers, and for me, that was like that was part of who I was, and so I never thought of anything else. It wasn't until I got older that I was questioning a little bit, like staying on this very kind of focused, maybe in some ways narrow path.
It kind of leads me to yet another question. So, how much of this entire process was nurturing by your parents and mentors, and
Yeah.
how much of it evolved out of your own maturity and thinking?
Well, I think that my my parents. Uh, let's see. My mother was very supportive of music, but neither of my parents knew really anything about a music
Okay.
career or how to shape it or what to do. If
Uh-huh.
anything, my mother's role, who was the one involved, was she enjoyed taking me to the lessons and just kind of the music that I was making, and I think she felt connected with that. Um, but the teachers just kind of kept me guided on that path,
Uh-huh.
and yeah, I just always just kind of was naturally drawn to that, and my development was just part of that. I
Got it.
didn't question it. I was learning what I was learning, the this classical music, but I was always also discovering because I almost naturally I had this sense of wanting to discover new things about music. I would hear something, and then I would go to the piano or go to a piece of music paper and start writing something to try to expand a little bit of what I was thinking about, what I was working on, what I was listening to try to grow. That's just kind of who I was as a person.
Wonderful. Would it be right to say that you were an exceptionally gifted child in terms of these
Well,
talents?
I mean, I don't like to necessarily judge myself that way, but I mean, I got into Juilliard, and that's where all the most talented kids were going. So I was surrounded by people who were writing, 8-year olds who were writing operas and doing incredible things. So I like to
Sure.
think maybe I was blending in a little bit with that kind of thing.
Marvelous. Uh, in terms of music education, like you mentioned rightly, you enrolled yourself into the Juilliard School of Performing Arts, wherein you learnt your foundations to classical music and music in general, right? So at this stage, you have your own online music conservatory, and I'm sure you have many students that enroll into a lot of intuitive programs. And I'd like to understand from you as to what are some of the indicators that you and your team has to gauge the process of learning that is qualitatively happening, right? I know obviously that we are a culture that goes by the idea of having or gaining a lot of musical certificates, degrees, and added to our fancy portfolios, right?
Yeah.
And I'm sure that people complete the process successfully, and some of them get stuck midway or whatnot, right? So what I'd like to understand from you is, how is real value being added through this entire educational program in terms of working in a music industry, and speaking with regard to your online music conservatory. So how do you guys go about that?
Well, first of all, it's not my educational world that I've been running for years is not, it's not a school. So it's not like a strict program where we take you from, A to Z. It's just not. That's not who I am. That's not
Uh-huh.
what the program is. So just understand that the online conservatory that I have was born out of an interest in helping and educating and sharing. I've always been interested in sharing and allowing people to, learn from the experience and the, knowledge that I've gained. So I put it together a long time ago with a student that was very technically internet savvy, pretty much before any of the online programs were available. I think I was like one of the first people to have something online that was an
Right.
educational resource for keyboard player, which is crazy, but that's what happened. And so I would feed it, if you will. I'd feed it information. I'd feed it etudes that I would write. I'd feed it some harmonic things that I did, and I tried my best to do it in different levels, like beginner, intermediate, advanced. Um, and I, for years came up, I think, with a lot of good material based on that kind of concept. But honestly, I was never, um, I was never spending the time to make it a formal program.
Right.
So what my educate so I think my educational offerings, whether it's through Patreon or Usic Play or any of the various outlets that I do, I try to take my experience and make as cohesive and as kind of Jordan like set of material that I can. And then if I work with a company like a Usic Play, they're experts at forming the material so it's presented to a student in a way that they could really learn from it. So that's kind of like the I'm like an artist who also offers educational things, and I enjoy it. I'm into it. I've always done clinics even for the synthesizer companies where I feel like I have the capability to explain things very clearly, because as a user, as somebody that appreciates when somebody shows me something and it's just clear and well, I don't know, for lack of better words, basic. I can appreciate what's on the other side of when I speak. I want it to be like, okay, I'm going to say this in a way that this person will really understand it. I think too often things are clouded with complication. So yeah, that's kind of like where I'm at with all of that.
Okay. So I mean, from what it seems, it's more of a repository wherein you try to feed information based on your personal research and your learning. Would it be
Sure.
right to term it
Yes.
that way?
Yeah, and also my focus these last couple of years, a few years, has been more on Patreon
Okay.
and doing things through Patreon that are educational, like uploading my own etudes or doing a live stream where I'll analyze one of the pieces of music I've written or a dream theater piece and look at how it was programmed, look at some of maybe the technical considerations at the keyboard,
Correct.
those kind of things. But the most important thing about uh, like if you think about me as a teacher, is that I feel like the combination of my background with classical music and rock music and technology and who I am has led me to come up with some unique perspectives about how to grow as a musician and a performing musician. That's my you know custom, if you will, or that's my best offering.
Very remarkable. Uh, you are a multifaceted individual, right from being a chief music officer at CME Music and director of music technology at Rolly Labs. Or you could also be described as an innovator, like you rightly mentioned, when it comes to all the incredible tech savvy applications that you have built as part of Wisdom Music. So some may know of you as a child prodigy that we discussed earlier, who
Yeah.
joined Juilliard School of Performing Arts at the age of 9, or even keyboardist, writer, and performer for supergroups like Liquid Tension, Experiment, or Dream Theater, for example. Right. So, do you ever suffer from an identity crisis, having these many identities? And I'm sure for each person, they view you from a very different identity. So, how does that work?
Um, that's a good question. I mean, I do have my thoughts, my hands, if you will, in a lot of different things. But because it's all very much, who I am, and they're all things that are very close to me, that I'm passionate about, it all becomes me. It's all one thing. It's not really like doing this and then doing something very different. It's not like I'm a banker and then I'm also
Yeah,
a lawyer and then I'm a musician and then it's all me and my musical technical world.
correct.
Um, so I get inspired when I hear and see, like, for example, some new technology that, offers a new method of expression. And I'll, lend my interest and maybe some ideas in that direction, or give a helping hand in some way, whether it's suggestions or whether it's connecting to other people that I know in the industry. I just love it. I'm also a people person, which makes it very possible for me to do that. So, like, I mean, it's not unusual for me to find somebody working in music technology and say, "Hey, that's an awesome idea. But how about if you did this, and I can introduce you to this person, and I can help you grow to this point." So it's all me. It's all very close to me and forms who I am as a person and as a professional in the music space. So, and also I tell people that, because I don't have a whole lot of other hobbies, aside from just doing music and working with music technology, so there's more time for that.
Sounds fair to me. In fact, I was having a very short conversation with one of them who had the privilege to hang out with you in India. His name is Vijay Ganesh from Swarna Bhumi Music Academy.
Okay,
So
yeah,
he says that he took you around, Tamil Nadu, and they did a little bit of Kanchipuram sari shopping and all of that for your wife at some
yeah,
point.
right, right.
And
That's
he was
awesome. Yeah, I
he was
remember.
mentioning about the fact that you mentioned that you're a very people oriented person, and social in that sense. So
Right.
I can relate a lot from whatever he said
Oh,
today.
cool. That's
Yeah.
awesome. Yeah, totally.
So, what made the 8 year old Jordan Rudess write a letter to Mr. Bernstein wherein you said that I think I can play better than you? What was the impulse behind something like that?
Well, that was a long time ago, first of all.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But my mom was really like, she remembers sitting on the bench, like
Uh-huh.
outside of the concerts as a young person,
Okay.
listening, not even necessarily buying a ticket, but just being a kind of an ear outside of these parks where the orchestra would play. And so she would talk about Leonard Bernstein, and that was one of the things that she opened up to me, is to see this musician who I think that she could relate a little bit my talent to, maybe in a way, to what Leonard Bernstein was doing, because obviously a classical conductor and a pianist, and also working with other genres. Because even as a young person, I was always playing, different kinds of music, and as well as
Right.
my classical music. And that certainly, when I went to Juilliard, I'd have to hide that a little bit. I'd have to pull away and go to a bar practice room away from my teachers and play blues and boogie woogie. So there's this thing in my head about Leonard Bernstein. That's part of it. So I imagine that that's why that letter came out. as maybe a slightly. I guess I wasn't as humble back then as I am now. Maybe I was a pompous 8-year-old, and I decided to write him a letter. I don't know, but it was so amazing that it showed up because I was blown away when the Library of Congress called me and said they found this letter. I was like, "What? Oh my God, that's crazy!" Because I don't remember writing it, but I obviously did, and it's on my family stationery, and it's this is
Sure.
funny. Yeah, funny
Very,
stuff.
very funny. Indeed.
Yeah.
You were awarded the prestigious Grammy Award last year. Firstly, congratulations on winning this great award. So, what has winning the Grammy Award meant to you? You've been a musician of very rare passion and integrity, and you communicate that in many powerful ways. So, does an award really matter to a man of your commitment and drive?
The only thing that is notable about that is my suitcase is a lot heavier these days because I take it everywhere I go. I'm kidding. I don't. It
Yeah.
stays home. Um, does it really matter? It does matter from a career perspective and from a
Okay.
public social perspective, because the reality is that everybody knows what a Grammy is. They don't know some of the other things.
Correct.
You know, literally, like you get a Grammy, even if you're not connected with the music business, people are like, "Oh my God, you got a Grammy!" Like it means something. It means like, you know. So on that level, I mean, it can open doors.
Yeah.
It can give you an immediate kind of acceptance in certain situations. In any situation, like if you're being like if Dream Theater or if I'm being introduced, people say, "Here is Jordan Rudess, the winner of a Grammy." I mean, okay, so that's that part, and it just is what it is. As far as musically goes, I mean, it's great to be accepted, especially what's nice about the Grammy, quite honestly, is the Grammy voters are your fellow musicians and people in the industry. So that really is something that's very special that they, especially like in the metal category, we have all these fantastic bands in that category, and they're all kind of almost tipping the hat to Dream Theater in this case and saying, "Hey guys, like we grew up on Dream Theater and we love you guys and respect." And so that's really nice. I mean, but on the other hand, we were outside of that whole arena, if you will, for a long time. And we
Okay.
didn't think we'd ever be inside of it. Did it? We were making our music. We've been making our music. I've been making my music for years. Has
Correct.
the music ever really gotten that much better? Come on. I mean, we've been doing this for a long time. And I think we've made some great albums even before the Grammy Association knew who we were, that we were a band.
Yeah.
So, somehow the world wrapped around the record company, starts to play a little bit the game, if you will, of, submitting and making people aware and a little bit of, maybe even, it's not really marketing, but just spreading the word that, Dream Theater is, here and we've got a song and it's up for a Grammy. And, all of that enabled us to be part of that more commercial world. And I'm really glad that we did that because again, it opens doors. It means that we have a career builder. Means that more people who wouldn't pay any attention to us before um, would kind of notice and pay attention and have maybe some respect. So yeah, I mean that's what it is. Musically, I mean whatever. We keep doing what we're doing, and we always have, but there is a reality to the Grammy thing that is notable.
Do you have it? Do you have a Grammy in the suitcase next to you somewhere in the room?
Oh, of course. Let me get it now.
Right. uh,
Right.
I'd like to.
Heavy. It actually has some weight.
Oh, is it?
It's funny.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I wouldn't know. I'd like to know your evolution as a writer from your 1993 album Listen to your latest release Chase. So, what have been some of the uh, improvements that you've personally felt in terms of the musicality?
Yeah. Well, for one, I mean, from a technology side,
Uh huh.
I'm always inventing and open to new ways of musical expression. And those new ways of musical expression through technology open new doors of creativity as well. So my own music and my own path has been enriched and has, kind of evolved from the tools that I use, whether it's something like a continuum, um, or a instrument, or my very own GeoShred, which is one of my wisdom music application that is actually very popular. You probably know in India,
Yeah.
because of its very kind of advanced pitch intelligence. You can do all the Carnatic kind of things on the
Correct.
playing surface. But anyway, no matter what it is, whichever direction I grow from that, and that's a big part of it. Like I just discovered, I should also say like something like a seaboard, which was the
Yeah.
Rolly, invention, which enabled a keyboard player to put their hands on a surface and really do a lot of interesting bending of notes and sliding and all that. And most recently, I'm very excited uh, about this new instrument that was designed in France that's called an Osmos. It's
Oh,
made
okay.
by a company called Expressive E. It's
Uh-huh.
really interesting because it's a traditional keyboard. It looks just like a keyboard, feels
Okay.
like a keyboard, but the keys actually will move side to side, and you can do vibrato on them, and
Oh, okay.
it'll do very interesting things. Like most keyboards, when you press the keyboard down, when you get to the bottom of the key and it triggers a contact, it'll make sound. But on this
Correct.
keyboard, it can, as soon as you start to press the key, the moment it starts to go down, it can start to allow a sound to enter. So you could do
Incredible.
some incredible things. It's really,
Yeah.
really a game changer, as they say. Just came out very recently, literally like was released a few weeks ago.
Okay.
Um, so things like that are guaranteed to change what I do. And besides that, well, going from technology to maybe just music in general, but the software that comes out, people's software that comes out with new sounds, new ways of making sound, besides the physical ways of expressing it, like a GeoShred or this Osmos keyboard. The software can make you think about the great sounds, can open your mind to new possibilities too. If all of a sudden you're able to morph between a vocal sound and a trumpet, with some kind of a physical expression, then you start going, wow, I could do something
Yeah.
something different. But beyond that, I'm just speaking just musically. I mean, I learned so much from other kinds of music and other musicians, not just other players. That is always expanding my world.
Correct.
Hanging out even with the amazing musicians that I have, people like Marco Miniman or Tony Levin, or absolutely the guys in Dream Theater, like a Mike
Yeah.
Mangini, John Petrucci, all these guys, they offer so much. There's
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
many lessons there. Steve Morse, Rod Morgenstein. I can think of each guy I've worked with, and everybody by their own intake of information and musicality is able to give something else, give something else to the music, and also share something else with each of us. So I could, pinpoint each guy and what they've given to me as far as my own growth as a musician. So that's kind of, and besides just listening to a lot of different things, opening my ears, like, oh, I hear a sound going, wow, well, how is that working? Well, what is that harmony? And then I go to the keyboard and go, oh wow, okay, I could do that, and maybe trying it in a song, something like that. So there's so many ways to kind of open the perspectives and allow different things to come through me.
Lovely. Tell us something about your creative process. Very often, people carry this notion that it might be a mystery to the artist sometimes, who is making music, as it
Yeah,
might be to someone who's listening to it in the other end, right? You're someone who draws influences from from the likes of Gentle Giant, Genesis, Rick Wakeman, and of course, like, considering your timeless melodicism that you associate yourself, like you mentioned, with Dream Theater or Liquid Tension Experiment, in terms of forward thinking lines and textures, right?
yeah.
So how much of these elements in music are consciously derived and processed without too much of intrusion and planning in terms of your own intellect? And how does it work for you generally?
Wow. I need you to repeat that question one more
Sure,
time.
sure. So you draw a lot of influences from the bands and the artists that I mentioned, right?
Right?
So
Yeah.
there is timeless melodicism in your work that you've
Yeah.
exhibited as part of some of these projects in
Right.
terms of these forward thinking lines and the textures, right? So I'd
Yeah.
like to know how much of it is consciously derived and processed without too much of pre planning.
Oh, that's kind of interesting. Well, first of
Yeah.
all, let me say that uh, I'm a real improviser. Like
Okay.
what I like to do, what I
Uh huh.
can do slash like to do, is sit down at the keyboard or one of my instruments and just play spontaneously and allow music to just kind of like flow through me.
Correct.
Um, which is one of the joys of my life. For me, it's like easier than speaking
Yeah.
the English language. I mean, it's just that's what I do.
Yeah.
So, and when that happens, when that kind of fluid output comes, whether it's improvising or towards the goal of composing something, it's fed by all the influences that I have, whether it's Genesis or Yes or King Crimson or Emerson, Lake and Palmer or Stravinsky or Bach or whatever. All those things, kind of like they become part of, all the influences become part of a musician. And if the musician is able to, I think the coolest thing to do, the most effective thing to do, the most interesting thing to do is kind of allow it to all kind of blend together and mold together and to become something that's original.
Correct.
One of the hardest things to do for musicians is, to compose, but compose something original that is like not doesn't sound just like, something else. I guess I've been kind of like lucky in that sense because I feel like with my own music, it's easy for me. It's almost natural for me to just take the influences in and put them out, you know,
Right.
soup, like just I don't know why that is. I mean, I don't consider myself to be like academically, that sharp. I just consider myself to be a very musical person and able to express myself musically and maybe even, if anything, express myself with the English language about how I create the music. I think I get better at that. But yeah, so the influences all kind of come in and they merge in my mind and they become my vocabulary for making music.
I understand.
Cool.
Do you believe in the cycles of life and rebirth and the many musical masterpieces as you see when you might look back upon the work that you've created over the years? And I'm sure if you had to look ahead, there might be certain landmarks or milestones that you might be trying to reach. Or would it be right to say that you've have completely been able to achieve total surrender to the process of music and mastered it?
Well, I think that it's always something that is this growing and evolving and changing and maybe even circling. You going. It's hard. It's not a one direction thing at
Correct.
all.
Correct.
Sometimes when I'll go back and I'm on this path and I go back and I listen to something that happened over here, I go, wow, that was interesting. Maybe there's something to even learn from that.
Yeah.
So it's so much not like a constant timeline, but I think life, is like that as well, where we might, hopefully we learn as we get older, we get new perspectives, but also there's things about youth that are so can be so clear, and you can manage certain things about life when you're younger and have a certain kind of energy that even if you're older and you have maybe you're wiser, you might not be able to hit the target as well. I don't know if that makes any sense, but I'm kind of like it's an interesting. You're making me think in an interesting way, and I think that we're always kind of like operating in this circular way where the past is just as important as the future. We're kind of you know gaining, growing, experiencing on this other kind of a timeline.
From what you said right now, it led me to another follow up question. a lot of
Okay.
musicians feel that some of their best work is ahead of them as they are entering their 70s. So, could you tell me about that philosophy?
Well, I mean, that totally relates to what I just said. I mean, maybe. I think that I'm certainly, always inspired, always interested, always gonna, like discover new things about music. But is it going to be my best? I certainly hope so. But I guess what I'm saying is that there's not. I don't think there's any that there's. I don't think that there's necessarily a guarantee of that,
Right.
given the nature of life and this kind of multifaceted timeline that's happening and our different skills at different ages. And I hope that I have the energy, first of all, just in a very basic form, like when I'm not 70 yet, but now I feel good. But who knows, maybe at 70 I'll be just sitting in front of one of these technology creations and waving my hands and creating colors and space and music. And is that better than what I did before? Or is that, I guess it's up to somebody might say that's his best work. But meanwhile, am I playing in 13/8 and like a million riffs and, playing guitar and keyboards at the same time? When I'm, 75, 85, I might literally be wearing something around my brain that's like, just triggering images on a ambisonic sound system with, again, with like colors and lights and things. And I might be floating very nicely, but who's to say,
We'll
We'll
find
see.
out. We'll find out.
We'll find out. Yeah.
You worked with three extraordinary guitar players, with the likes of Vinnie Moore, John
Mm.
Petrucci, Steven Wilson. So, could you contrast your experiences with some of these contemporaries for the people of India?
Sure. Well. Let's just say that Steven Wilson isn't. He is a guitar player, but he's not in the same guitar space that a John
Correct.
Petrucci or a
Correct.
anymore. Steven is a producer, a composer, and uses the guitar as a vehicle for his expression.
Right.
John Petrucci, on the other hand, and Vinnie Moore are guitar players, and that is what that's what they do. I mean, they're also composers, but they're master guitar players. But yeah, I mean, these guys, the guitar world is very interesting, and I'm especially aware of it now because over the last year or so, I've been practicing the guitar and
Oh,
kind of as a
wow.
hobby.
Okay.
I've been learning how to play the guitar more, so I'm more attuned to that.
Uh huh.
Um, what's interesting to me is now you have all these guys who are incredible shredders doing. You turn on Instagram, one
Correct.
after another, you see these amazing things happening. Guys just playing like crazy on the guitar. You're like, wow.
Yeah.
But and it's fantastic. It's great to learn a skill like that. But what separates somebody like a John Petrucci is the music that he writes, or any of
Yeah.
the guys that you mentioned.
Right.
What is the musical offering that John Petrucci gives to the world? I mean, yes, he's an incredible guitar player with the world's best singing tone, but it's the music that he's written, and that we've written together, that make the difference with who he is on the planet. And Vinnie Moore, similar, also an incredible guitar player, but also the music that he writes. These are composer guitar. They're not just guys who are figuring out incredible things to
Correct.
blaze through and blow your mind. Um, and of course, Steven Wilson, is one of my, what a close friend, but he's also a beautiful musician, just offering such lovely music and again, using the guitar as a helpful vehicle to write and
Right.
to express. So yeah, I mean, that's how I feel about it.
Okay. Uh, how does spirituality inform your music? Does it play a role in terms of your music?
My music kind of is my spirituality, I would say. If
Okay.
anything,
Okay.
is that definitely is. It's just I use it for meditation. One of my favorite things to do is to both, sit at like a piano or synthesizer and kind of attune myself with the music. And that's very, very personal. But I also like to, see if I can create something musically that can also bring other people into a more spiritual kind of meditative, relaxed, space. I think music is the perfect, vehicle for achieving a spiritual space. I think it's probably a more an easier kind of path in our world. More people should be thinking like that for our world would have less trouble. But yeah, so I definitely, I use music as a spiritual tool, and that's kind of how I feel.
Wonderful. I'm sure there must have been many blissful moments in terms of your career. So, what have been some of the most significant or the gratifying moments that you could possibly highlight in terms of your musical career spanning several many decades?
Yeah. Um, well, what's interesting about being a productive musician is that you get to create, albums and mark time that way.
Okay.
So, yeah, I mean, so when I create an album, when we go through the whole process, and all of a sudden you've got the final result, you kind of go, "Wow, like this is what this is what I was doing. This is what I did. This is what I assembled, and it's marked in time, and it's offered to the world." And those things that those you know products, if you will, are the kind of things that are, for me, like the easy way to remember where I was at that point, whether it's Dream Theater's, scenes from a memory, or a 6 Degrees of Inner Turbulence, or it's my own like Listen album, which definitely marked a period of time where I was at, what I was thinking about, musically, how I was playing. Everything is in there. It's like there's so much information as part of these releases. It's so interesting, like when I did A Chapter in Time, which is one of my solo albums, which I did
Correct.
as kind of my own, um, not answer, but my own way of experiencing the whole pandemic and the lockdown. That was
Hmm.
so personal to me, and I managed to create something that was not only personal, but I also managed to get it out, which is a trick
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
itself. Because it's hard to think you're making music for other people, but at the same time have it be that you're making music totally for yourself. So, so that album again marks the time, A Chapter in Time,
Yeah. Yeah.
appropriate name, but
Of
all
course.
of them are, all
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
albums are a chapter in time. So the highlights, I would say the highlights are those particular time periods where those things happen. But of course, there's certain live shows that were highlights, because maybe like we played at Radio City Music Hall in New York City, which New York is my hometown, and when we played there, it was big feeling of like, wow, oh my God, we're playing Radio City Music Hall, or we go to Italy and we play, at the Milan, stadium for 15,000 people. And it's like,
Correct.
you look around and go, wow, I've got to remember this moment. It's incredible. Like, wow, you don't know if it'll ever happen again, but this is, a whole head trip, it's like, wow. So yeah, there's definitely things. And then there's the funny moments, or not funny now, but not so funny then,
Uh huh.
that also are become very memorable, like, being in Mexico City and all of a sudden being, having a little earthquake, and then walking on
Wow.
stage after it, and, going to use my rotating keyboard stand, and I make it tilt towards the audience for a lead about 15, 20 minutes into the show. And then for the whole show, I couldn't get it to go back. So I'm playing
My
the whole show
goodness.
on a tilt. You remember that because it was so crazy, wacky, and it wasn't great at the time, but it's almost funny when you look back.
Sure. Incredible, incredible experiences. I'd love to hear a lot more of these anecdotes, but I'd like to make this conversation a little more interesting by inviting out our special guest for today. I
Okay.
couldn't think of a better name than Yogi to be our special guest. So he's been professionally working in the music industry since the age of 6, and he's the founder, songwriter, vocalist, producer of the band Pineapple Express, which is a very successful progressive cross cultural band in India. They're a
Awesome.
multilingual act and
Yeah.
highly sought for in terms of their live music experience. So they've toured all across the country, and Yogi also does production, music production. He's also an FOH and lighting engineer working with artists who have come down to India. We've had artists like Marty Friedman, Pliny, Divine, Indian artists such as Gopi Sundar, a band called Chai Med Toast, who he has personally worked with, in terms of creating that live experience for them.
Cool.
And he also has this experience of performing at over 1,200 concerts in the Indian independent music industry, right? So he's also been part of reality shows like Sare Gama Pa, and yeah, he's a huge Dream Theater fan. So I thought it'll be best to invite him out and find out more from Yogi himself.
Awesome. Sounds fun. Let's do it. You want a drum roll?
I wish we could put like some synth intro for Yogi to come in.
Yes, me too.
Hello.
Hello.
How are you, Jordan?
Oh, there he is. Hey, how's it going?
It's going great here. How about you, Adi? How are you doing?
Very well, very well. We couldn't be more excited from inviting you onto this interesting conversation we've been having.
LGS. So tell me, what have you been talking about?
Oh, pizza, Chinese food, just some different things. So yeah.
Okay, so you talk about all the interesting stuff, and now I need to nerd out. Okay.
Yeah. Take it away.
Exactly.
Okay. Firstly, I don't know what Adi just told me about my connection with Dream Theater, but I think listening to Dream Theater's music was the single most life-altering moment in my entire life. So, firstly, thank you guys for that. And I play the keyboard, so thank you for inspiring me in several ways to explore the keyboard as an instrument and do things that wouldn't traditionally be thought of with a keyboard. So, yeah, thank you for being that for me. Thank you.
Oh, that's awesome to hear.
Okay, so well, I think of the keyboard as the single most all-encompassing instrument in the world, at least in my opinion, because you name another sound, another instrument, you can probably play that on a keyboard and very convincingly. Do you ever feel like you've hit the ceiling with that? Like there's nothing more left to explore, since you've done it all?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I've been so interested in the evolution of musical expression, which has led me down a lot of different interesting avenues of both hardware and software products. Things like the Seaboard, as a good example.
Yeah.
The Rolly Seaboard, or like my very own GeoShred, which, as I was telling Avi, is very popular in India because of its, really intelligent kind of the way it deals with pitch.
Yes.
You can do all these. Or not. I don't know if you heard like some of the guys like Mahesh Raghavan.
I know Mahesh, yes.
Yeah, doing magical stuff with GeoShred and everything. So yeah, I think there's more to life, if you will, than just like a traditional keyboard. There's no doubt, and I'm constantly pushing and creating and asking, and whatever it takes to allow myself to have more fun and others,
right.
Making music and being more expressive. And I was telling Avi that I'm really excited because of this new Osmos keyboard. Actually, it allows us to do things that we weren't able to do before on something that's more like a real traditional keyboard with additions. They're referring to it as an augmented keyboard. So I don't know if you've had a chance to.
No, I haven't. I should probably check it out. Yeah,
it's amazing. Yeah, it's really amazing. It's a game. It's totally a game changer. And the reason it is because it's not only a really good idea what they did to augment the keyboard, but it's also really it's balance between engineering and musicality that seems to really work. It seems to really, when you play it, you feel like, wow, this is feels really well made. It's like a concept that kind of is whole. So, which I think that some of the other things, there's a lot of experiments going on out there. Sometimes you feel like, oh, it's almost cool, like there's a lot of good things, but in this case, it's like okay, this is cool. So just to make it quick, so the Osmos allows you to do things like, as soon as you start pressing down a key, the moment it goes down, it's tracking where it's at in time. So you
Mm-hmm.
can do almost like this continuous control of an instrument. Like you could play a cello sound just by starting to press down the key and then having it go to the bottom and having the cello sound fully come in.
Yes.
And
Yes.
it's MPE, meaning that every key is separate. So you could have some
Yeah.
notes fade in faster than others. And then, how like keyboards have what we usually call aftertouch.
Yeah.
When basically on a keyboard, when you have aftertouch, you're like use this as an example. You press the key, you hit the bottom, and then there's nowhere to go, but you keep pressing, and it's kind of like triggering more sound. On the Osmos, you're playing along, and then you press down on the key, and there's actually almost like this cool feeling, and there is more room to go. Even though when you're playing along, you're not hitting that extra physical space.
Right.
So there's pressure of just pressing down the note, which is measured in the distance where you are when you're pressed into pressing the key. But there's also aftertouch, which is a real aftertouch. And then the keys themselves, well, you can press them down and there's stabilization in the software. But when when the key goes down, you can also literally wiggle the
Ah,
key from side to
yes.
side. So it's not vibrato like where you are physically in that key space. It's how much pressure you're pushing from side to side, which is really cool. Actually, the Roly Lumi has that ability,
Yeah.
but it doesn't. It's a little bit. It just feels a little bit different. The Osmos is has their own way
Very
of.
cool.
There's a lot of good, there's other things too. You should definitely check it out. So for me, this just came out, a couple, 2, 3 weeks ago, and I think it really will get people really thinking, and is going to change the way we view a keyboard. Because up until now, we never thought of the keyboard as a continuous instrument,
Right.
like a woodwind or a voice or a bowed instrument. But now it is. It can be. So I think it's going to surprise and interest a lot of people.
Lovely. Speaking of how we view the keyboard as an instrument, uh, I was going to ask you this later, but it feels better to do that now. So, GeoShred. I tried playing the GeoShred when I met Mahesh for lunch about a year and a half ago. We were just hanging out and talking about GeoShred. So I
Yeah.
tried playing the GeoShred. I think in guitar when I write songs, but I cannot play the instrument, the guitar, the instrument. I
Okay.
don't seem to have the ability to view the fretboard the way a guitarist does. Now I noticed that.
It's really hard. I'm trying
Yes,
these days as well.
yes, I
That's funny you
noticed.
said that. Yeah, right, right.
Yeah. So, do you have any plans in place for GeoShred to have a more traditional keyboardy layout where maybe we have alternating rows of white keys and black keys, and every row is an octave?
It's very possible. I think that's a great question. I mean, I think that the GeoShred layout does make sense for what it does,
It does.
uh, but it doesn't mean it's the only layout that somebody might be interested in. Like you said, maybe have a harder time wrapping your head around that kind of a layout. Whereas if it was more traditional, like a keyboard, you might be able to really do it. Part of the problem is that you've got this arrangement of like black and white keys. If it's a traditional keyboard, the way the pitch intelligence works between the notes and the software works, it's not as straight ahead to program like the
Right.
distance between like an E and an F, let's say in a keyboard, a B and C, as it is to like from a white note to a black note, and it starts to change the whole system of the way that it works. Um, so all of a sudden you start saying, oh, well, don't make it a traditional keyboard, make it lines or something like that, and that gets away from what you're kind of almost saying.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I mean, other interfaces, given the time and the resources, are totally possible.
That's good. That's good to hear. Okay. Very interesting.
Yeah,
Okay. Let's talk about improvisation. So when you're improving, perhaps on stage, perhaps at a jam, perhaps while coming up with a piece of music, uh,
yeah.
there is a certain level of lag between the brain and the hands. Uh, in the sense that are you really thinking of the notes before you play them when you're improving, or are you letting your visual and muscular knowledge of the scale and the keys and how they're laid out guide the passage you're playing?
It's really hard to completely nail down in words what's happening. It would be an interesting scientific experiment to look at somebody's brain while they're improvising. Maybe look at my brain
I would like
while
to
I'm
look at yours.
improvising. Because, like, sometimes, as an example, I'll be improvising in my brain away from the keyboard, like coming up with something, just like almost like the equivalent of your mind wandering, just
Right.
generally different things. I'll do that musically. I'll have a whole, all these notes that'll pass through my head and phrases, and I'm not hardly even thinking about it. And then I go, oh my God, like, wow, I just, like, that's so weird, So it just happens. This is this fluid thing, like a rush of wind or something like that, that happens, or like, it's hard to explain. It's kind of like, I sometimes view it as like talking. I mean, even though my verbal communication is not as fluid as my musical
Mm,
communication, there is a similarity in it where when we're talking, we're not reading from a script right now,
right.
and somehow each word is following the next, and it's hard to explain exactly how we're thinking that, or what the next word should be, but yet we're making sentences and the words are coming out and they seem to be going faster and we don't know. It's not like we're, okay, I'm going to say this next word now because, you know what I mean? Just,
Yeah.
so musically, I view, if I could kind of like explain it or try to teach it, I think of it as a vocabulary, I guess. Like,
I suppose. Yeah.
a word could be like a C major scale, right? It could be like one word, or it could be an arpeggio, like or some other shape, like a little blues riff, like a riff could be a word. So you're connecting riffs, you're connecting scalular patterns. It's almost like how kind of weave through. Like I was saying, you mentioned the fretboard, and over the last year, I've been actually, as a hobby, been learning to play the guitar,
Yes.
having a lot of fun with it. And one of the things that's really hard or that's the learning process, is okay. So I learned how to do a sweep arpeggio. Oh, good, I got it. Great. Oh my God, now how do I use it in a musical phrase? Like, how do I go, like, the connection is like to put the words that you learn together. That's a whole nother thing than to learn each thing. A guy can be doing the most amazing sweeping, but does he really know how to improvise with it and how to use the sweep within the context of a musical phrase, or an improvisation? That's so the art of improvisation is definitely mysterious, and it's something that is a big part of my life. Because a funny story, and then I'll let you go to the next question. But I used to play with a group called the Paul Winter Consort,
Yeah.
with Paul Winter, who's a sax player, and the cellist's name was Eugene Friesen, wonderful guy, great cellist. And we were at it was before our rehearsal, and I was sitting at the piano. I was just playing whatever the hell came into my head. And Eugene, and when I stopped, he says, Jordan, he said, what was that? I said, I don't know, I'm just playing. He says, man, you throw away more good music than most people write in a lifetime. I said, well, I don't know. What do you want me to say? I'm just playing. So to me, it's just a stream of consciousness kind of thing, for good or bad or whatever it is. But that's what it is.
That's amazing. Okay. Yeah, this has already been so much fun. Okay. So I think when you spoke about how you think of notes that just occur to you perhaps when you're in the shower or just hanging around somewhere. Uh,
Yeah.
well, that's how I write songs. I record those ideas on a voice note or
Cool.
or a voice memo and take that into the studio. So the thinking aspect in the studio is reduced by a huge margin, and then I can put out what came to me very naturally when I was doing something else into songs. And I
Okay.
think note selection is by far the second most important thing, no, in songwriting, the second most important aspect of songwriting, right after having the right structure and having sections flowing from one to another smoothly enough. What
Yeah.
do you think defines a good song?
It's a good question. Well, it's interesting because there's a lot of ways to look at that. As a
Yeah.
progressive musician, writing like epics and crazy music and parts
Yeah.
that, there's something about the prog musician where it's acceptable and it's kind of almost like a cool thing to go from this part and then you go to this part and then you change to here and then it goes to this and that, you know. And in the classical, world, if you think about certain classical music, you could almost think of that kind of music moving and weaving and changing a lot as well. Or if you think about pop songs, they could be a lot more maybe simply structured and have these forms. So a lot of times for me, that the honestly the easier way out is to just have it be, this thing I played that kind of that leads towards this because harmonically it's doing something interesting, and then I take the melody and I put it in the bass and in the lower area, and then I put other chords around it. So I'm almost like using these musical tools to like continue the composition rather than thinking about the absolute form. A funny story is that I was writing this. I was commissioned to write an orchestral piece,
Wow.
right,
Okay.
by this promoter in Venezuela, and I thought, oh great, I'll write a concerto. So I started to write a concerto for keyboard and orchestra. And
Okay.
when I enlisted my young friend Aaron Boschbu, who's the Turkish musician. I don't know if you know his name, but he actually conducted Dream Theater's Breaking the Fourth Wall. He's
Okay.
amazing talent from Turkey that I met as a young guy. He's an orchestrator and everything. But I sent it to him because I wanted to get his help to orchestrate it. And he said, Jordan, the first thing he said to me before he commented about anything of the piece, he says, Jordan, this is not a concerto. I was like, what do you mean? This is not a concerto. He didn't say like it's a cool piece or anything. He just says, it's not. You can't do this. I was like, wow. Like, but I want to write this piece. And he was like, well, it's not a concerto. So I finally found out that it's not a concerto because it wasn't following the form that a concerto is written in. A concerto has a certain form. I was just writing music. I was just going for it, like it was this one part and that made me think about another part. And, is what I was doing a form? Sure. I mean, it's a musical form. It's like a journey, right? I'm good at writing journeys. So the form question is really interesting. And like, even so I will say that even in dream theater, when we write some things that are complicated, my fellow bandmates in the old days, like Mike Portnoy, John Petrucci, very, very interested and good with form. Even if we were writing something complex, they would be like, okay, this is the verse, this is the pre-chorus, this is the chorus, this is the pre-this, this is the pre-that. And I could tell the way their minds work were different than my mind, which I really appreciated. And what was interesting about that also for me is that I always found myself able to write a smooth bridge. Like if you're going to go from this part to this part, I can find chords and find ways to get there.
Yeah.
But with Dream Theater, it almost became over the years a style that they'd be going down this road, if you will, and then they turn. And to me, when I first heard that, I was like, "There's no bridge. Where's the bridge?"
Yeah.
And then the fans were like, I love that turn, that quick turn. So structure, form, it's interesting, it's important, and it's even important in the crazy world of dream theater. But there's so many ways to do it. You can
Right.
make a right turn, and people will love that. Or you can just go on a journey and not have A, B, A, whatever it is, So, but that said, if I'm sitting down and I'm trying to write a song, yeah, then it becomes a real question, and it becomes, how do you put it together so it makes sense? Am I repeating the verse too much? Do I need a bridge at this point? So I will say right now that form thing is not my specialty, but I can appreciate it and I understand, finding the right form can really help to make something, great.
Yeah. I think that formless music, as opposed to having an A B C D kind of structure, that really hits the spot for me. provided that those sections have some kind of flow between each other. And
Right.
that's how I approach songwriting as well. So it's very
Cool.
nice to
Cool.
hear that.
Awesome.
As a follow up to that, um, I think we have a bunch of prog head musicians back over here in my country, and there's always this age old conversation about striking a balance between emotion and technicality, right? So
Mhm.
is there something that you gravitate towards, consciously or subconsciously? Because I get these urges to write something really cool that I can pull off, that I can play, something
Yeah.
difficult and cerebral. But looking
Right.
back at the days when I used to give into those urges, it feels like I have dialed that down quite a bit now. And I'm mostly reassessing every addition that I make to a song to serve some kind of purpose. Do you
Mhm.
have any advice for artists who are in a similar crunch?
It is always an interesting question between the technical aspect and just serving the song. It's not necessarily easy, especially if you are like a player and you want to feel the dance of your instrument. You want to just kind of go for it. Or, I mean, there's magic in the fluidity that different players have when they play like fast and clean or whatever. There's a sound, there's a feeling, and there's even emotion behind it. Hopefully, but finding that balance is, something you also have to think about. Who's your listener? What are they capable of even
Processing,
absorbing?
yeah.
I feel like we live in a day where, you scroll through Instagram and you see the most amazing players, like guitar players that are just doing things that you're like, holy shit, this is incredible.
Mm.
What is that? But then, this might not be any real music associated with it. Um, and then I always think, well, there's definitely something very cool about gaining a skill to be able to do that. That's a beautiful the high thing to be able to pick so cleanly and sweep so perfectly and do all those kind of things. It's different. It is a different thing than when you're trying to compose a piece of music and you're doing it for like either yourself and an audience. Um, and as somebody who's worked on my agility and my speed, and I'm not necessarily using the word technique because I think technique also refers to the art of being able to play
Play, yeah.
beautifully slowly. Technique is, you don't have a good technique if all you can do is play fast. If you can
Yeah.
play slow, I mean, like John Petrucci has a great technique in my mind, because when he plays a beautiful melody, it's soaring and it's glorious and beautiful. When he plays fast, he can do that too. So that's a good technique. Um, so, but again, to fuel the song, maybe a great player, maybe the better thing for that song would have been to not play, something really fast at that moment. It's so I can relate to that challenge. I feel that challenge because sometimes I'll be sitting there and go, I want to play something, but like somebody producing, like in a Dream Theater case, John might say, no, let's do something just, it's better here to play chords because we're trying to write music, we're trying to write a song. So you can imagine the challenge, like in a Dream Theater like
Yeah.
session.
I
We
can.
feel good when we write this 2-page thing that John and I play in unison of 30-second notes. We get that out of our system, we do it, and it's awesome, and then we can go on and write the rest of the song. Sometimes you just have to get it out of your system
Yeah.
because
It's like a
that's who you are, right?
it's like the case of a zoomie with a dog or a cat, I guess. You've got to expel that energy out. Yeah.
Right, right. Absolutely.
Okay. So that probably brings me on to my next question. What do you listen to? What do you enjoy listening to? And what's your opinion on, forgive me for lack of better words, but what's your opinion on less musical music, such as hip hop and mainstream pop, that prefers to keep it revolving around sex, drugs, money, and anything that is relatable, and actively subdues intellectual musicality to achieve that?
Yeah, I don't like that. I'm not into it. No, that's not my thing. But I will say I like some rap music. Like, if I hear something like an Eminem thing where, I'll hear that and I think his sense of rhythm is so unique and really
Right.
interesting. And maybe what he's saying is also, on point. And regardless of, whether I really relate to the kind of delivery or whatever, but, I can relate to music if it has qualities in it that are interesting to me in a musical way. Like if it's just a constantly pounding bass drum, then I'm like, I don't want to listen to this. I hate that,
Right.
But if it's got some element to it, if the harmony is interesting, if the way the voice is articulating the rhythm, if that's interesting, that's cool. There's got to be something in it that is musical, like give me something, give me some cool sounds. I'm really very sonic, it doesn't
Yeah.
even have to be necessarily harmonically interesting, or it doesn't
Okay.
even have to be rhythmically interesting. You could have some really cool sonic experience to it, like really interesting, captivating sounds that are cutting edge or fresh or interesting, and then I'll like it too. But if it's just, a guy rapping about, you know, sex, drugs, whatever he's politics, who knows? And it's just boom, 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 boom. That to me is like the lowest form of like possible music, and I'm not that interested in it.
I feel the same way. Okay.
Okay, got that out of the way.
Let's get that. Yeah. So, do you think musicians in general have an inherent unspoken responsibility to shape and guide the way music as a subject and art form is perceived in the future? And your feelings about how the global audience base for progressive music or general intellectual music is getting relatively smaller and smaller compared to, well, the more accessible mainstream relatable music,
Yeah,
which seems to just keep climbing up. It's on a steady incline.
yeah. I think that this is something that is a little bit concerning about the world that we live in.
Yeah.
I mean, there's certainly a lot of people that still love like what I might consider to be real music, or you might consider to be like great music. There's definitely a lot of people that do
Yes.
respect that, love it. As there's a lot of people who still listen to Bach and Debussy and Stravinsky and everything. People who have those kind of like um, that kind of perspective or that kind of thinking will always gravitate towards these maybe higher forms of musical expression. Okay, so the mainstream was, we can be sad that the mainstream seems to have gotten this place where they like things really dumbed down, or people aren't really listening to music the same way. You go into a restaurant and they're blasting some music with like some pounding beat because they
Yeah.
want you to drink more because, just to loosen up, whatever. It's fucked up, it's too bad. It's really sad. And I do think that musicians, like guys like, or bands like Dream Theater, Steven Wilson, or, you know, whoever do have a bit of a mission, I mean, whether they consider it to be that or not, but I mean, I my hope is that these people who are making this, I would say, I guess, more intelligent, higher form of music, that they would just continue to be able to put it out there and try their best to make it happen, and offer people, we don't want it to get to a point where they just say, because of business or whatever, that they just have to give up. Like the music business gets so bad that it's just like, well, I can't even do this anymore because
Right.
not
Yeah.
enough people are coming to the shows. The promoters don't want to pay the money to, put on a concert. I mean, it's honestly, it's really a concern. In my lifetime, I've just seen it change so much. Of course, I used to, the biggest stylistic influence in my life is the progressive rock stuff from like, Genesis and Yes and Emerson,
Yes.
Lake and Palmer and all that. And it was a very different period of time in every way.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That was huge. I mean, if Dream Theater were doing what we do in like the 70s or early 80s, we would have had an entirely different career. I mean, we've had a good career, there's no doubt, but it would have been an entirely different thing. Then the amount of money that the internet says that we have now would be actually probably true, but but unfortunately it's a different period of time. It was actually a really funny article that I just, because I see these Google things and I clicked on it. It says, how much money do all the Dream Theater guys have? Or like now. And it said, like, I have like $25 million. And I'm like, what? Where do they get these numbers from? What are these people thinking? Oh my God, I wish I had that. But I don't know. But anyway, but the music is just, the music business has changed so much.
It has.
Yeah, I'd like
Yeah.
to chime in if that's okay, Yogi. In the interest of time, I'd like to come to the last part of our agenda today, which is the rapid fire round. And I'd like both of you to participate in equal
Okay.
capacity. So, shall we get started?
Yes. And I do need to go soon. So thank you so
Correct.
much.
Yeah, it's just 3 questions. And,
Yeah.
and let's see how the two of you do in terms of this.
Okay.
What is that one song that always makes you cry?
Always makes me cry. Um, what's it called? The Adagio for Strings by Samuel Barber.
Oh, great choice. And you, Yogi?
There's a song called My Mind by Yebba Smith.
Oh,
That gets
wow.
me every time, yeah.
If the two of you decide to put together like an all-star progressive rock group, who'd be in it? Who would you recruit? Given, say that you have $25 million, like Jordan mentioned some time back, who are you going to recruit?
I already have the guys in my band. I don't need to recruit anybody.
But would you like to add some musicians in specific?
God. Yeah. I mean, always fun to play with other musicians. I haven't worked. Oh, I have worked with him actually. Maybe do some more work with Guthrie, the guitar player. Guthrie Govan is such a great guitar player. I wouldn't mind doing some
Right.
more stuff with him.
And what about you, Yogi?
I would definitely go with Guthrie on the guitars.
He's so great. Yeah.
Probably just for the heck of it, Matt Gatska on drums. And we would, I don't know, this is such a tough question. Who would I get on bass? This is all very conflicting.
Oh, the bass player. Well, yeah, Mohini Day is so awesome.
Oh, yeah.
Can't choose her. Yeah, you know who's a great singer though that I have worked with a little bit that I always want to work with more is Jonah Nielsen from
Oh, yes.
Dirty Loot. What
Dirty
an
Loot.
incredible talent, and a friend of mine too. So maybe we'll do more. But yeah,
They came
Marvelous.
down to India about a month and a half ago, and they were killer.
fantastic. Yeah, I bet it's great stuff.
Great. So that brings me to my last question for today, which is a custom in all of my interviews, and I ask all of my distinguished guests this very question. So here's the question. Down in the distant horizon, what would you want to be remembered as?
Right. My first thought personally about that is, there's certain music that I make, as we discussed, that's more for like maybe tuning your spirituality, or that I use for my own well-being. And I like to think that people will think of my music. I mean, obviously they'll think of it in a lot of different ways because there's a lot of output, but I really care about if the music has touched somebody to really heal them or to help them or to make them feel better for I guess whichever kind of music I put out there that does that. If that's the way they think about me in the future when I'm long gone, then that would be amazing.
Wonderful.
I, on the other hand, do not want to be remembered. It's okay if they don't remember me, but if while I'm alive, if I've managed to make the music that I am making right now, which, let's face it, gets a lot of flack because I am blending two styles of music that technically do not and should not belong together according to the gatekeepers. If that does well and that stays on, it lives, and no one remembers my name, that's okay with me.
And we can use that concept as the material for our next talk. Like, who
As
cares
yes.
if you're remembered in the
Yeah.
future, right? We can go into a whole spiritual domain and
Correct.
talk about that as well.
Totally. So this interview will be additionally aired on Big FM Shillong and Aizol. on the Sunday primetime show between 5 to 6 p.m. And it will be out on my YouTube channel in an audio video format and across all major audio streaming platforms very soon. Thank you so much, Jordan and Yogi, for taking time out. It's been an incredible blessing, honor, and a privilege. Thank you. Thank you once again.
And
Thank you
so
for
nice to talk to both of you guys. What a pleasure. Really been great. And please do let me know so I can help you get the word out when
Certainly.
we publish the
Certainly.
interviews. My
Certainly.
team will broadcast it.
For sure. For sure.
Okay.
Take
been
care and
amazing.
have a nice day.
Thank you,
Okay,
guys. Thank you for
guys.
having me, Adi. Thank you, Jordan.
Likewise. Thank you
Thank
so
you,
much.
Yogi.
Bye.
Thanks, Adi. Bye, guys.
Bye.